He didn't answer, not at first. He simply stared into the dark liquid in his cup, his jaw tight, as if fighting back words he never spoke aloud. Then, as if the weight of the silence forced them out, he murmured, "My name is Logan. Logan Moretti." The name flickered in her memory. She'd heard it before, in whispers, in headlines, in rumors spoken too quietly to be safe. The Moretti crime family. Her blood went cold. She should throw him out. She should lock the door and never open it again. But instead, her heart betrayed her. Skipping a beat, his piercing blue eyes lifted to meet hers. That night, Emily Carter had no way of knowing that letting him in for one last coffee would change her life forever. Because Logan Moretti wasn't just another late-night customer. He was the most dangerous man in New York. And somehow, against all reason, she felt like she had just met her fate. The next morning, Emily woke with the taste of coffee and questions still lingering on her tongue. She had replayed the scene 100 times. The midnight knock, the way Logan had looked at her, not like she was just a barista wiping down counters, but something more. She should have been terrified. She should have slammed the door in his face. Instead, she had let him in. And worse, she had wanted him to stay. By sunrise, the streets outside her Brooklyn apartment buzzed with life again. Taxis honked, vendors shouted, and yet all Emily could hear was the echo of his voice in her mind. One last coffee? At the cafe that afternoon, customers filtered in and out, oblivious to the storm brewing in Emily's chest. Sophie noticed, of course. Her little sister always noticed. "You're distracted," Sophie said, as she tied her apron, raising an eyebrow. "Did something happen last night?" Emily froze mid-motion, nearly dropping a stack of cups. "What? No, nothing." Sophie narrowed her eyes, clearly unconvinced. "Uh-huh. You only clean the same spot on the counter that many times when you're nervous." "Spill it." Emily forced a laugh, praying her sister wouldn't press further. "It was just a late customer, that's all." She didn't say his name. She couldn't. Not yet. But by evening, Emily didn't need to say anything. The news did it for her. A headline blared from the muted TV mounted on the cafe wall. "Logan Moretti cited after months underground." Emily's stomach dropped. She stared at the image on the screen. His face, sharp and magnetic, standing outside a black car with tinted windows. His name carried a weight laced with both fascination and fear. Customers whispered, "That's the Moretti boss. Runs half the city's underground. Dangerous man. Untouchable." The man who had sat at her table last night, who had smiled at her chipped mug of coffee, whose blue eyes had looked not powerful but painfully human, was the head of the Moretti crime family. That night, when the bell above the cafe door chimed again, Emily's heart nearly stopped. There he was, Logan Moretti. He didn't bring bodyguards. He didn't bark orders. He simply stepped inside, the faint chill of the night air following him, and sat at the same table by the window as if it already belonged to him. Emily stood frozen behind the counter. She should tell him to leave. She should run, but her body betrayed her again, moving on instinct as she reached for the coffee beans. "You came back," she whispered, sliding a cup across the counter minutes later. Logan's lips curved into that same shadowed smile. Did you think I wouldn't? Emily folded her arms, trying to mask the tremor in her chest. I saw the news today. I know who you are. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Logan leaned forward, his gaze steady. And who am I, Emily? Her throat tightened at the sound of her name on his lips. You're dangerous. The kind of man people cross the street to avoid. The kind of man who doesn't belong in a coffee shop at midnight. He finished for her, his voice low. Her heart pounded. He wasn't denying it. Logan's fingers tapped against the mug, slow and deliberate. Then, to her shock, he spoke, not like the untouchable boss the city feared, but like a man admitting a secret. I've had 1,000 dinners at the finest restaurants, sat at tables worth more than this entire shop, but not one of them felt like last night. Not one of them felt real. Emily's breath caught. You're right, he continued, his eyes locked on hers. I am dangerous. My world is built on power, on loyalty, on blood. But here, sitting across from you, drinking coffee from a chipped cup, I almost forgot. She didn't know if it was a confession or a warning. Maybe it was both. The bell above the door jingled again, snapping the moment. Two men in leather jackets walked in, their eyes darting from Logan to Emily. They froze for a fraction of a second, their recognition clear. Logan's demeanor shifted instantly. The softness vanished, his jaw tightened, his gaze hardening into steel. The men muttered something under their breath, turned, and left without ordering. Emily's pulse raced. The cafe felt smaller, suffocating with invisible danger. Who were they? She asked, her voice trembling. Trouble, Logan said calmly, finishing his coffee. He stood, towering over her once again. But not your trouble. He leaned closer, his words brushing her skin like a promise and a threat all at once. Lock the door after I leave, Emily, and remember, sometimes danger knocks softly. With that, he walked into the night, leaving her trembling in the warm glow of the cafe lights. Emily couldn't sleep, because no matter how much sense told her to fear him, her heart whispered the truth she didn't want to admit. She wanted him to knock again. The following days passed in a blur of restless nights and long hours at the cafe. Emily tried to tell herself that Logan's midnight visits were just a strange coincidence, an anomaly in the otherwise quiet rhythm of her life. But deep down, she knew better. Men like him didn't show up at coffee shops by chance, and they certainly didn't come back night after night unless they wanted something. And Logan Moretti always got what he wanted. By the third night, the regulars had started to notice. Old Mr. Henderson, who had been drinking black coffee at the same corner table for 15 years, leaned over as she poured his refill. That man, he muttered, his voice low. The one with the eyes like ice. You know who he is. Emily forced a smile, avoiding his gaze. Just another customer, Mr. Henderson. But the old man shook his head, his weathered hand gripping the cup tighter. No, not just another customer. That's Moretti. I've seen his picture in the papers. You be careful, girl. Men like him don't bring peace where they go. The words clung to her all day. By evening, a group of college kids came in, laughing and loud. One of them pointed toward the window table, Logan's table. Yo, isn't that where the Mafia guy has been hanging out? My cousin swears she saw him here 2 nights ago. Emily's stomach twisted. The rumors were already spreading. And in a neighborhood like Brooklyn, rumors had a way of growing teeth. That night, Emily returned home later than usual. Sophie was waiting up, curled on the couch, with a blanket and a book. She looked up, concern written all over her young face. "You've been different," Sophie said softly. "Like you're here, but not really." Emily hesitated. "It's just the cafe. I'm tired, that's all." Sophie closed the book, her expression sharpening in a way that reminded Emily she wasn't a little girl anymore. "No, it's more than that. It's him, the man in the suit, the one everyone whispers about." Emily's throat went dry. "I saw him last night," Sophie admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I forgot my homework in the back, and when I came in, he was there, sitting like he owned the place." "Emily, do you know who he is?" The silence was answer enough. Sophie's eyes widened, fear flashing in them. "He's dangerous. I heard kids at school talking about him. The Mafia, Emily. That's not a rumor. If he's showing up at our cafe, that means we're in the middle of it now." Emily reached for her sister's hand, her heart aching at the tremble in Sophie's voice. "Listen to me. He hasn't hurt us. He's he's different when he's here." Sophie pulled her hand back. "You're defending him." Emily had no answer, because Sophie was right. Somewhere between fear and fascination, she had started to defend Logan Moretti. The next midnight, the knock came again. Emily stood by the door, her hand trembling over the key. Every instinct told her to leave the lights off and walk away, but her chest ached with a strange anticipation she couldn't resist. She opened the door. Logan stood there, as though he'd known she would. "Evening," he said. "One last coffee?" As he settled into his usual spot, Emily noticed something different. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with faint scars. His knuckles looked raw, bruised. Her breath caught. "What happened to you?" He glanced at his hand, then shrugged. "Business." She wanted to press him, but the weight in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she made his coffee, sliding it across the counter. "Business looks painful," she murmured. Logan took a sip, his gaze never leaving hers. "Pain is just part of the job." Emily swallowed hard. "And what job is that, exactly?" For a moment, his jaw tightened. Then he leaned forward, his voice low. "You already know." Later, as the city sank into quiet, Logan leaned back, his fingers circling the rim of his mug. His eyes had gone distant, as though the walls of the cafe had loosened something inside him. "You know what people think of me?" he began. "They think I wanted this. My father raised me to believe power was the only way to survive. I didn't inherit an empire, Emily. I inherited chains. Golden ones, maybe, but chains all the same." Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding. "I've lost friends," he continued, his voice rough. "Brothers. People who thought they could trust me. Power doesn't make you safe. It makes you alone." She set another cup of coffee in front of him, her hand trembling. "Then drink," she said softly. "At least here. You don't have to be alone." When Logan finally rose to leave, Emily walked him to the door. That's when she saw it. A man standing across the street, leaning against a lamppost. His cigarette glowed like a warning flare in the dark. He wasn't passing through. He was watching. Logan saw him instantly. The softness she'd glimpsed vanished, replaced by sharp edges and a lethal calm. He moved slightly, shielding her with his body as he opened the door. "Go inside. Lock it." His voice was a low command. But Emily couldn't move. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Who is that? His gaze was fixed on the man across the street. But he spoke to her. This is my world, Emily. This is the part you shouldn't see. He turned his head, his eyes finding hers in the dim light. The look in them was dark, intense, and possessive. You don't know what you're doing. Emily tried to step back, but her body betrayed her, moving closer instead. Neither do you, she whispered. His thumb slid across the back of her hand, sending sparks through her veins. No, he said softly. I know exactly what I'm doing. The question is, do you? His eyes flickered to her mouth, then back to her eyes. The tension between them was magnetic, undeniable. She wanted to say no, to end this before it consumed her, but the truth erupted in a trembling breath. Yes. Logan moved around the counter in 2 long strides, closing the space that had kept them apart for too long. He stopped just inches away, his hands rising to cup her face. Emily, he murmured, her name breaking on his lips like a prayer. And then he kissed her. The kiss was nothing like she expected. It wasn't rough or demanding. It was desperate, like a man starved for something he never thought he could have. It was a confession and a claim all at once. And as she kissed him back, the dangerous truth settled in her heart. It wasn't just that Logan Moretti was a mafia boss. The dangerous truth was that she was already falling for him. His lips pressed against hers with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs, but his hand was gentle as it cupped her cheek, anchoring her in the tempest that was him. Emily melted into the kiss, a shiver running through her as her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. Outside, the storm raged. Thunder cracked and rain hammered against the glass, but none of it touched her. For the first time in years, she felt alive, terrified, and utterly, thrillingly alive. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathless, Logan rested his forehead against hers. His eyes, usually as sharp and cold as steel, were raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never thought possible. This is wrong, she whispered, her lips still tingling. Maybe, he breathed, his voice a low rumble. But it feels more real than anything I've felt in my entire life. Before Emily could answer, the faint sound of wet tires on pavement caught her attention. Through the rain-streaked window, a pair of headlights crept past, moving far too slowly. Logan's body went rigid. His arms slid around her, pulling her back slightly as his gaze tracked the vehicle. It paused for a moment, a dark silhouette in the downpour, before vanishing into the night. A knot of ice formed in Emily's stomach. What was that? Nothing you need to worry about, Logan said. But his voice was tight, strained. He looked back down at her, his jaw hard as stone. But it's a warning. My world doesn't stay outside these doors forever. Her breath hitched, caught somewhere between fear and a desire that frightened her even more. And yet, when he pressed a softer, lingering kiss to her forehead before he left, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. No matter the danger, she wanted him to knock on her door again. That night, long after he disappeared into the rain, Emily stood alone in the café, her fingers tracing her lips as if the memory might fade if she didn't hold on to it. She had crossed a line, one she could never uncross. And though she knew it could cost her everything, her heart whispered a truth she could no longer deny. She was falling for the mob boss. The rain had stopped by morning, but Emily's heart was still soaked with the memory of his kiss. Every time she closed her eyes, she could feel it again. The firm press of Logan's lips, the storm raging outside as if the universe itself was bearing witness. It had been reckless, impossible, forbidden, and yet it was the most real thing she had ever felt. But with that truth came danger, because the moment her lips touched his, Emily Carter stopped being invisible. She was no longer just a barista in a forgotten corner of Brooklyn. She had become something more, a weakness for Logan Moretti. And in his world, weaknesses were targets. By midday, the cafe was buzzing with whispers. Customers filed in, but their gazes lingered on her a little too long. Their conversations hushed as she passed. A group of regulars sat by the window, their voices low. "I swear it was him," one of them muttered. "Tall, blue eyes, dark suit. That was Logan Moretti." "No way he'd step foot in a hole in the wall like this," another scoffed. "I'm telling you it was. My cousin works in Midtown. They say the Morettis own half the clubs in the city. If he's here, it's for a reason." Emily's stomach twisted. She forced a smile as she delivered their drinks, but her hands trembled as she set down the cups. They were right about one thing. Logan Moretti never went anywhere without a reason. That evening, Sophie arrived to help her close up, humming softly as she tied on her apron. The moment she saw Emily's distracted expression, the humming stopped. "He came back, didn't he?" Sophie asked, her tone sharp. Emily froze. "Who?" "You know who," Sophie replied, her eyes knowing. "The man from the other night, the one everyone's whispering about." "Emily, you're playing with fire." Emily turned away, scrubbing the counter with unnecessary force. "He's not what people think." Sophie let out a short, humorless laugh. "He's exactly what people think. You just don't want to see it." Emily's shoulders slumped. "He saved me," she whispered, surprising even herself with the confession. "He's dangerous, yes, but when I'm with him, he doesn't feel like a monster. He feels—" She trailed off, her throat tightening. "Like what?" Sophie pressed. Emily met her sister's gaze, her own voice cracking. "Like someone who finally sees me." Silence stretched between them. Then Sophie shook her head, her eyes filled with a sad wisdom. "Being seen won't protect you when his enemies come knocking." The words cut deeper than Emily wanted to admit. That night, the knock came, just as it always did. Emily hesitated longer this time, her hand hovering over the lock. Every instinct screamed at her to let the night pass without him. But the memory of his lips, the way his voice had broken when he said he couldn't stay away, pulled her forward. She opened the door. Logan stepped inside, his suit immaculate, though his eyes carried the weight of exhaustion. "Evening," he said softly. "One last coffee?" Emily tried to smile, but it faltered. "Logan, people are talking. They know you've been here." "I don't care," he said simply, sliding into his usual booth. "Well, I do," she snapped, the sharpness of her own voice surprising her. "This cafe is my life. If people stop coming because they're afraid of you, then I'll make sure they keep coming," he interrupted, his voice steady. "I will protect what's yours, Emily." Her chest tightened at the conviction in his tone. But before she could answer, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Across the street, just beyond the glow of the lamp post, a figure stood watching from the shadows. Emily's breath caught. Logan. He turned, his eyes narrowing instantly. His body shifted, every muscle taut. For the first time, Emily saw the predator beneath the polished exterior. The man across the street didn't move. He simply stared for another long moment, then melted back into an alley. Emily's hands were shaking. Who was that? An enemy, Logan said flatly. His gaze softened as it returned to her. But they won't touch you, not while I'm breathing. The next morning, Emily found a stranger sitting at the counter before she'd even unlocked the door. He was broad-shouldered, with a sharp jaw, a leather jacket stretched taut across his frame. Can I help you? Emily asked cautiously. The man smirked. Name's Victor. Logan sent me. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Sent you for what? To keep an eye on things, Victor said, sipping a coffee she hadn't poured. You've got shadows circling this place. He doesn't want you or the kid sister getting caught in the crossfire. Emily's stomach plummeted. It was one thing to feel the tension when Logan was near. It was another to know his men were now stationed in her world, watching her every move. She should have felt safer. Instead, she felt trapped. That night, when Logan arrived, Emily confronted him. I don't need guards in my cafe, she hissed as she poured his coffee. You need protection, Logan countered calmly. No, she shot back, slamming the mug on the counter. What I need is my life back. My normal. Every time you walk through that door, I lose another piece of it. His jaw tightened, his blue eyes darkening. Do you want me to stop coming? The words lodged in her throat. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because the truth was a double-edged sword. Finally, she whispered, I don't know. Logan stood, his presence towering over her, his voice raw with emotion. Then I'll keep coming, until you do. Later, as she locked up, Emily's hands still trembled. She told herself she should be terrified, that she should banish him from her life before it was too late. But when she closed her eyes, she didn't see the shadows outside or the guard at her counter. She saw Logan's hand brushing hers, the desperation in his kiss, the promise in his voice. And she realized the truth she had been avoiding. The danger wasn't just outside her door. It was in her heart. She was already his. The morning began like any other. Sunlight streamed weakly through the cafe windows. The hiss of the espresso machine. Sophie humming softly as she arranged pastries in the display case. For a fleeting moment, Emily almost believed life could return to normal. Almost. But normal had slipped away the night Logan Moretti first knocked on her door. Victor still occupied the same stool by the counter, a silent, watchful sentinel, pretending to be just another customer. His presence was a constant reminder that her life was no longer her own. Shadows lingered at every corner, invisible but terrifyingly real. Sophie noticed too. Doesn't it bother you? She whispered to Emily as she frothed milk for 2 lattes. That guy, just sitting there all day, acting like he owns the place? He's not here for us, Emily murmured, trying to convince herself as much as her sister. He's here because of Logan. Sophie set the tray down with a huff. Exactly. And if Logan brings this much trouble just by existing, then maybe you shouldn't. Don't, Emily cut her off, her voice sharp with a mix of fear and defiance. Don't say it. But Sophie's silence said it all. It happened in the span of a heartbeat. Emily went to the back room for more napkins. When she returned, the front of the cafe was empty. Sophie's apron still hung on its hook by the door. Her phone sat abandoned near the register, but Sophie was gone. Emily's pulse spiked. "Sophie?" she called out, her voice echoing in the suddenly cavernous space. She rushed to the door, her gaze darting up and down the street. Nothing but the blur of traffic and the faces of strangers. Victor was already on his feet, cursing under his breath as he pulled out his phone. They took her. Emily's world tilted on its axis. "What do you mean, they? Who?" Victor's jaw clenched. DeLuca's men. They've been circling for days. They finally made a move. The name hit Emily like a shard of ice. She'd heard Logan mention it once, in a low, dangerous tone. Marcus DeLuca, a rival boss, sloppy and ambitious. The thought of Sophie in his hands made her blood run cold. "No, no, no," she stammered, her body starting to shake. Victor gripped her arm, his touch firm and grounding. "Call Logan, now." Logan was there in less than 20 minutes. Emily had never seen him like this. The quiet, brooding man who drank coffee from chipped mugs was gone. In his place was the true head of the Moretti family. His jaw was granite, his movements sharp and lethal, and his blue eyes burned with a cold fury that made even Victor flinch. "Where?" Logan commanded. Victor gave a tight nod. "A warehouse near the docks. DeLuca's men were seen heading that way." Emily grabbed Logan's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "Please," she begged, her voice tearing. "You have to bring her back. She's all I have." Logan turned to her then, his expression softening just enough for her to see the man beneath the steel. He took her trembling hands in his grip strong and sure. "I swear to you, Emily," he said, his voice raw with conviction. "I will bring Sophie back, even if I have to burn this city to the ground." And then he was gone. A storm in human form, leaving Emily standing in the wreckage of her fear. The docks were deserted, a thick fog rolling in off the water. Logan's black car pulled up in silence, its headlights cutting through the mist. His men moved with lethal precision, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the shadows. Inside the warehouse, Sophie was tied to a chair, her wide eyes darting toward every sound. Marcus DeLuca circled her like a vulture, his voice a slick whisper. "Your sister made a mistake, girl. She let my enemy into her life, and now you get to pay the price." Before Sophie could answer, the sharp sound of dress shoes echoed through the vast space. The door burst open, and Logan Moretti strode in. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. DeLuca's men raised their weapons, but Logan's presence alone seemed to freeze them in place. He was every inch the Mafia boss now, radiating power and menace. "Let her go, Marcus," Logan said, his voice like thunder rolling across the water. DeLuca chuckled. "Ah, Moretti, the king finally leaves his castle. Do you care that much for a little barista's sister? Or is she just another piece in your game?" Logan advanced, his hand brushing the inside of his coat. "She isn't a piece. She's family." And then chaos erupted. Gunshots exploded, the sound ricocheting off the steel pillars. Logan's men swarmed the room, moving with deadly efficiency. Victor took down a guard, disarming him in seconds. Another man fell as Logan fired, his aim cold and unforgiving. Through it all, Logan never took his eyes off Sophie. He moved like a predator, each step bringing him closer, until he stood between her and DeLuca. DeLuca snarled, pressing a blade to Sophie's throat. One more step, and she bleeds. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Logan's voice dropped, quiet and lethal. Touch her, and you will never see the light of day again. DeLuca hesitated, sweat beading on his temple. The steel in Logan's eyes broke him. With a curse, he shoved Sophie aside and bolted for a back exit. Logan let him go. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. He ripped the ropes from Sophie's wrists, his hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her to her feet. You're safe now, he murmured. Sophie clung to him, tears streaming down her face. You really came. I promised your sister, Logan said, his voice rough with emotion, and I don't break my promises. When Logan brought Sophie back to the cafe hours later, Emily nearly collapsed with relief. She rushed forward, wrapping Sophie in a fierce hug, sobbing into her hair. She's safe, Logan said quietly from the doorway. She's shaken, but she'll be okay. Emily looked up at him, her face tear-streaked. Her lips trembled as she spoke. You risked everything. For her, for me. Logan stepped closer, his blue eyes softer now, their lethal fire extinguished. Emily, he said, his voice low and certain, there is nothing I wouldn't do for you. Her breath caught at the raw honesty in his words. It was in that moment that she finally understood. Logan Moretti wasn't just a man of shadows. He was a man who had chosen her light, even if it meant walking through hell to protect it. And against all reason, against every warning, Emily's heart knew the one truth she could no longer fight. She loved him. The cafe never felt the same after Sophie was taken. Even when the chairs were full, even when the air smelled of cinnamon and fresh espresso, Emily could feel the shadows closing in. Customers still came, but their laughter sounded brittle, their smiles stitched with a nervous curiosity. She could hear the whispers whenever her back was turned. That's the one. She's tied up with the Morettis now. I heard her sister was taken because of him. Emily wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong, that she hadn't chosen this, that her cafe was not a battleground. But deep in her chest, she knew the truth. She had chosen. Every time she unlocked the door at midnight, every time she let Logan soften her defenses, she had chosen him. And choices always had consequences. Victor still sat in his usual spot by the register, a silent, hulking reminder that the danger was never far. Sophie stayed home more often, afraid to walk the neighborhood alone. Even the regulars hesitated to linger, as if every sip of coffee might put them on someone's list. Emily tried to hold it all together. She smiled, she baked, she pretended. But when night fell, she found herself staring at the door, waiting for the knock. When it came, she opened it without hesitation. Logan stepped inside, the storm in his eyes burning hotter than ever. He paid no mind to the quiet room. He didn't even sit down. He just looked at her, searching her face as if to see if she still blamed him for Sophie's suffering. You shouldn't be here, Emily whispered. His jaw tightened. And yet, here I am. That night, Logan finally gave a name to the shadow that loomed over them. Marcus DeLuca, he said, his voice flat, his hand wrapped around his untouched cup. He's the one who took Sophie. He's been circling my family for years, waiting for a weakness. And now... His eyes darkened. He thinks he's found one. A chill traced its way down Emily's spine. Me? Logan's gaze snapped to hers, sharp as a blade. No, not you. Me. He knows I care about you, and that makes you his weapon. It's why he won't stop. Not until he believes he's broken me. Emily's hands trembled as she gripped the counter. And what happens to us in the middle of your war, Logan? What happens to Sophie? To this cafe? To everything I've tried to hold together? His silence was heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, stripped of all its armor. I never wanted this life, he confessed, but I was born into it. My father built an empire, and when he died, I inherited a throne built on blood. I told myself I could rule it differently, smarter, cleaner. But power doesn't care about intentions. It only feeds on more power. Emily swallowed hard, watching him. The man before her wasn't the monster the city painted him to be. He was a king, suffocating under the weight of a crown he never wanted. A man who clung to her cafe as if it were the only place he could still breathe. You could walk away, she whispered, though even she didn't believe it. His laugh was humorless. There is no walking away, Emily. Not for me. The only choice I have is how much of myself I lose before it all burns down. Her chest ached with the pain in his words. She wanted to reach for him, to offer him a world without shadows. But she knew it was a fantasy. And yet, when he looked at her again, the fire in his eyes wasn't for war. It was for her. The next day, the knock came before midnight, jolting Emily. It wasn't Logan. Two men stepped inside, broad-shouldered and wearing cheap smiles. They didn't order, they didn't sit. They just leaned against the counter, their presence dripping with menace. Nice little place you've got here, one of them drawled. Be a shame if something happened to it. Emily's stomach nodded. We're closed, she said, her voice steady. The second man chuckled. Closed for customers, not for us. He stepped closer, his voice a low whisper that made her skin crawl. DeLuca sends his regards. Before Emily could respond, the bell above the door chimed again. Logan. The air in the room shifted, crackling like lightning. His presence filled the space, a thundercloud of controlled fury. His blue eyes blazed as he stepped between Emily and the two men, his voice lethally sharp. You've made your point. Now get out, before I decide you're not leaving at all. The men exchanged a nervous glance, their bravado crumbling. They backed away, but not before throwing a final warning over their shoulders. This isn't over, Moretti. She's marked now. The silence they left behind was suffocating. Emily gripped the counter, her chest heaving. You see? She whispered, her voice breaking. This is what happens when you're here. They'll never stop, Logan. As long as you keep coming, so will they. Logan's expression softened as he moved toward her. Then let them come, he said, his voice fierce. I will burn this city to the ground before I let them touch you again. Emily shook her head, tears blurring her vision. You can't fight the whole world for me. His hand came up to brush a tear from her cheek, his touch both gentle and desperate. I don't have to fight the world, Emily. I just have to fight long enough to prove to you that I'm worth the risk. Her breath caught at the raw sincerity in his voice. She hated herself for it, but her heart betrayed her again. Because even as the shadows gathered at her door, she realized she didn't want him to stop knocking. That night, as Logan left and the cafe fell into silence, Emily understood the truth she had been running from. This was no longer just her story, it was theirs. And Marcus DeLuca had just declared himself a part of it. The night that followed was unnaturally quiet. No rain, no storm, not even the distant hum of traffic. The city outside seemed to be holding its breath. Inside Carter's coffee, Emily wiped down the tables for the third time. The cafe had always been her sanctuary, the one place she felt in control. But lately, even here, the air carried a tension she couldn't scrub away. Midnight came and went in silence. No knock, no deep voice at the door. Only the sound of her own breathing. It started with the faintest smell of smoke. At first, Emily thought it was the coffee grinder overheating, but then the smell grew thick and acrid, catching in her throat. She spun around, her heart seizing as she saw an orange glow creeping from the storeroom. Fire! She gasped, rushing forward. Within seconds, the flames surged, greedy and relentless. The wooden shelves crackled. Thick smoke billowed toward the ceiling. Emily grabbed the nearest fire extinguisher, but as she aimed it at the fire, the blaze only roared louder, spreading faster than she could fight it. No, 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 she cried, coughing as smoke burned her lungs. She stumbled back, panic rising like a tidal wave. The cafe, the dream her parents had built, the one thing she had fought to keep alive, was being devoured before her eyes. Emily darted toward the door, but a flaming beam crashed down, blocking her path. The heat was a physical press against her skin, suffocating and unforgiving. Her thoughts blurred in the chaos, but one pierced through the haze. Sophie. She couldn't leave her sister alone in the world. She couldn't die here, not like this. Shielding her face with her arm, she pushed through the smoke again. Her vision swam, her chest heaved, and for a terrifying moment, she thought this was the end. Then she heard it. Emily! A voice, deep and fierce, cut through the roar of the fire. Logan burst through the door like a hurricane, his jacket cast aside, his face a mask of grim determination. He didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. He charged into the inferno, the flames reflecting in his piercing blue eyes. Logan, Emily sobbed, stumbling toward him. He caught her before she could collapse, his arms wrapping around her, as if nothing else in the world mattered. Smoke swirled around them, but his voice was a steady anchor in her ear. I've got you. I'm not letting go. He pulled her against his chest, shielding her from falling embers as he guided her, step by step, through the burning wreckage. He moved with a precision that told her he had walked through fire before. But Emily knew this wasn't just instinct. It was desperation. He would have torn down the flames themselves to save her. At last, they stumbled out into the cool night air. Emily collapsed against him, gasping for breath, her body trembling with fear and relief. Behind them, the cafe roared, sparks lighting up the sky like cruel fireworks. And Emily broke. She buried her face in Logan's chest, sobs racking her body as she clutched his shirt. It's gone, she cried. Everything I fought for. It's all gone. Logan cupped her face, his own eyes glistening. No, the cafe was never just walls and tables. It was you, Emily. It was the love you poured into every cup, the hope you carried even when you thought you couldn't. That can't burn. His words wrapped around her like a lifeline, but the pain still clawed at her. It was all I had. No, Logan whispered fiercely. You have me, and I swear to you, I will rebuild everything you've lost, brick by brick if I have to. Because with you, Emily, I finally have something to build for. Her sobs softened into trembling breaths. She looked into his eyes then, truly looked, and saw not the Mafia boss the world feared, but a man who had chosen her over his empire, over everything. As firefighters rushed to contain the blaze, Logan held her, his body a fortress against the chaos. This was DeLuca, he said, his voice dark, his jaw tight. He wanted to break you, to break me through you. Emily shivered, her grief tangled with a new, sharper fear. If he'll burn my cafe, what else will he do? Whatever it takes, Logan said grimly. But hear me now, Emily. I won't let him take one more thing from us. She searched his face, her voice trembling. And what if fighting him costs you everything? Logan leaned closer, pressing his forehead to hers. Then let it, because nothing I have means anything if I lose you. That night, as the flames died to smoldering ash, Emily clung to him. Her dream was in ruins, but in Logan's arms, she found something she never thought she'd have again: hope. And she knew with terrifying certainty that she wasn't facing the fire alone. For weeks, the cafe stood as a charred skeleton. But amid the ashes, something else had taken root. The community rallied. Customers showed up with hammers and paintbrushes. Sophie sketched murals to replace the ones lost, her laughter slowly returning. And then there was Logan. He didn't just fund the rebuild. He was there, sleeves rolled up, hauling lumber and sweeping debris. Seeing the city's most feared man covered in sweat and dust, working to rebuild her dream, broke something open inside Emily. But DeLuca hadn't vanished. He doubled his attacks. Businesses loyal to Moretti were vandalized, men killed in alleys. Logan fought back with the full weight of his empire, but Emily saw the cost in his eyes each night. The exhaustion, the anger, the weight of a war he was fighting for her. One night, he returned, bruised and bloodied, and collapsed into a chair. Logan, she cried, rushing to him, you can't keep doing this. You'll get yourself killed. His hand caught hers, steadying her. If it means keeping you safe, I'll bleed as many times as it takes. Tears blurred her vision. I don't want your blood. I want you. Logan's jaw tightened. Then I have to end this, once and for all. It happened 2 weeks later, in a dimly lit warehouse on the same docks where Sophie had been taken. DeLuca had arranged a final meeting. Emily begged Logan not to go. He cupped her face. This isn't revenge, Emily. It's survival. If I don't end this, he will never stop coming for us. He kissed her, fierce and final, and walked into the night. The battle was brutal, but Logan emerged victorious. DeLuca's reign ended in blood and silence. For the first time in years, the city whispered not of war, but of peace. Months later, the cafe reopened, brighter than ever. Sunlight streamed through new windows, the scent of fresh paint mixing with coffee and cinnamon. Murals bloomed on the walls, Sophie's art a testament to their resilience. Emily stood behind the counter, her hand steady as she poured a cappuccino. She looked up and saw Logan at his usual table. This time, there was no storm in his eyes, only peace. That night, long after the last customer had gone, Emily locked the door, just as she had done countless times before. But now, when she turned, she was no longer alone. Logan was there, waiting to walk her home. The shadows were gone, chased away by the light they had built together, brick by painstaking brick. The key was in the lock, her heart swelling with a quiet contentment when the sound came. 3 soft knocks on the door. A smile was already gracing her lips as she turned. You don't have to knock anymore, Logan. But as the door swung open, she saw he wasn't holding an empty cup, nor was he asking for coffee. In his hand was a small, velvet box. Her breath hitched in her throat. Emily, he began, his voice laced with a tremor that his steady gaze defied. For my entire life, I believed that power was strength. But you taught me that true strength lies in allowing yourself to be seen, in allowing yourself to love. You saved me from becoming the very shadow that people feared. He lifted the lid of the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, and shimmering in the soft light of the cafe. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream of wealth or empires. It was just them, real. I don't want a throne, he said, his voice raw. I don't want an empire. All I want is one last coffee with you for the rest of our lives. Emily, will you marry me? Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she nodded, her voice a fractured whisper. Yes, always, yes. Logan's hands, usually so steady, trembled as he slid the ring onto her finger. Then he drew her into his arms, holding her not just close, but as if he had finally found the one anchor in a world adrift. From that night forward, Carter's Coffee became something more than a cafe. It was a sanctuary, a place people sought not just for caffeine, but for warmth and for hope. A place where stories were painted on Sophie's murals and whispered over steaming mugs. And at the very heart of it all stood Emily and Logan, no longer just a barista and a mafia boss, no longer light and shadow, but 2 souls who had chosen one another against all the world's warnings. Every midnight, Logan would still knock, a tradition born of chance, now kept by choice. And Emily would always smile as she opened the door. That simple ritual had, after all, given them everything. A journey through danger and passion, through heartbreak and healing, to a love that was, at last, forever. And so, the story came full circle. The coffee shop closed. A man of shadows appeared at the door, and the words were spoken, one last coffee. But now she knew it wasn't just another cup. It was the beginning of always.